This evening's Dharma talk is titled, I think it's Enemy Number One. Is that it? Who thought that up? Oh, I think that came from Sokuzan, and it was something to do with the talk I gave, or book study or something a while back, where I said something like that. Or and now she wants me to explain it. She wants me to give a whole talk on it. So if it goes awry, we know who to blame. So the idea there, of course, is just I'm always talking about the same thing over and over, as you know. So it's just some excuse to, so if somebody goes down to YouTube, I haven't heard that before. Well, they probably have. I'm saying the same stuff over and over again, and just in different ways. But I don't often do it with a hash pipe. It's not a hash pipe. This is a teaching stick. It's a kotsu. And what I did was not sacrilegious. What you thought was sacrilegious, but not what I did. Enemy number one. Enemy number one is a way of topic so that I can say a little bit and you can ask questions about that hidden aspect of consciousness that does not want to be discovered. It is called the ego or narcissism, or the self that has no particular credentials except the ones it can forge. In other words, lie, tell lie, things that are not true, buy into, believe, can conclude, exclude, anything. Anytime anything is being pushed or pulled or shut down, all three of those, passion, aggression, and ignorance, the self-centeredness can thrive and can get some kind of oxygen, some kind of relative complement to the mind stream, the life stream, the credibility of self. Trungpa Rinpoche gave a talk in early 1970s called Buddha-dharma Without Credentials. Awakened truth, Buddha, awakened Dharma, awakened truth, with no proof. So no, if there's proof, then it's not Buddha Dharma. It might be a kind of Dharma, but it's not awakened Dharma. It may not be sound asleep Dharma either, but it's not awake. And what is Buddha Dharma awake to? Simply put, there isn't anything else but Buddha. The awakening itself is a singularity, if you need one, which you won't need one if you see what it is. You might need one in order to approach that on the cushion in terms of the teacher, the teaching, and the community, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. We take refuge in the Buddha as the example of someone who is sane. In other words, not at war with anyone, even though they're in a human form. They're wandering around hungry or satiated, blind, or with piercing vision. Totally healthy or on the verge of collapse. Buddha. Refuge in the Buddha is someone who's sane. Refuge in the Dharma is what he taught, what the Buddha taught. Everything is dependently arisen. As I said, same talk over and over. Everything is dependently arisen. Nothing comes from its own side as an individual being or self, including the ego, including Buddha nature. Any conceptual structure is three paces back away from ultimate reality, because it needs to be, because it is the relative situation we have to work with. Why? Because we've been downloaded into a human form, and we've been here for a while, so we tend to believe we are somebody that can get somewhere. Relativity, someone who can fail at getting somewhere. And it's not that those situations don't show up of failure, success and failure, right and wrong, up and down, life and death, health and sickness. Of course they do. So the enemy number one, what's being pointed at there with that title, and I'm not sure what I said to the Traverse City Sangha that included that statement. I'm not sure I even did. Maybe that's something Kozan thought up and lied about in order to make me say stuff that I don't want to say, in order to get me to answer questions that he wants the answer to. Okay, enough lollygagging. So why is it's an enemy? Because it's always trying to fool you, swindle you, take away your wisdom mind, convince you somehow that what you're seeing is not true, or something else that you're seeing, this is the truth, you shouldn't do this, you should do that. But quite often I say to my students, don't tell anybody anything. If you're practicing the Dharma, practice the Dharma. Don't convert anybody. Buddhism does not convert people. If it's converting people, it's not Buddhism. Anytime you convince anybody of something based on your idea of what someone needs, you don't know the karma that another person needs to go through before they're even ready to receive the Buddha-dharma. What's being said, I'm saying, it's not that one person might not be helped by the Buddha-dharma, but not for 10 more years of what? Trudging around through samsara, trying to squeeze out some happiness out of relative truth. You might have to go through that. And you, me, we all should respect people's confusion. If you respect somebody's confusion, that doesn't mean believing them. It means keep your distance. Receive them, but don't join them necessarily. Don't object to them necessarily, unless you're invited into that by a question or something like that. And then you tell them about it, but keep it short. Get to the period of the sentence really quick. And then see if they have a question. If they don't, talk about your lawnmower. You know, the one that doesn't have a handle. It's handleless. And I don't mean Friedrich Handel. I know, not funny. So, enemy, number one. So it's an enemy because it's cheating you, causing you to continually to grasp at this and reject that, and increasing your paranoia about everything, about how you've been mistreated, how you're not getting what you deserve, how somebody else this is yours and somebody else is eating at your lunch counter and they shouldn't be there, and all kinds of relative things. It's a painful, isn't it? Painful. It's difficult. So we're using this image of some aspect of consciousness that is enemy number one. So it's the first misunderstanding, the first mistaken identity, the first culprit that is in hiding and trying to wear all kinds of masks and things where you can't see that this aspect of consciousness is like a cloud behind a barrier, behind a wall. And you have to see it. And how do you see it? You don't break down walls. You just look at them. Because nothing lasts, especially if it's not fiddled with, or if you don't start pulling on it. Even though Trungpa Rinpoche once said, referred to the walls of the mind, of the ego, like a brick wall you take apart brick by brick. I would say there's something to that, in that you very slowly see the little brick-shaped self-deceptions that show up, thinking that you're somebody that you're not, thinking that someone else is someone that they are not, that we tend to believe it, and then we begin to see, we made that up, that is not really happening there, we're inventing that. And then we might go into, why are we inventing that? And that why question will take you in another circle, and this is one of the ploys of enemy number one, is to get you to go in circles and make you think it's a straight line. The very nature of this samsara is circular. You have hopefully you have what do they call them? Auto-da-fe clocks? Auto-da-fe, no, analog, sorry, what confusion. Auto-da-fe, that's that other dangerous situation. So you have an analog, goes in circles. Sun and moon go in circles. Digital situations do not go in circles. Well, they do go in circles, but you get to go in circles for them. They're static. Enemy, somebody that's difficult, is pushing you, threatening you, taking your stuff, cheating you, whatever, robbing you of your wisdom. The bandits of hope and fear are on the path and are endeavoring to rob you of your wisdom, of your clarity. So if you don't say why, what would you say? You'd say the other W word is what. What is this? This is what you do when you sit down and face the wall, sit down, hold still. What the hell is this? You don't have to say the hell, but what is the wall? What is this posture? What is this? What is a human being, you in this case? What is this? What is sitting down, holding still, and endeavoring to follow the instruction, which is from this person, is just observe. Very simple instruction, very radical, very minimal instruction. And as soon as you begin to do that over a few days, few weeks, few months, it does not necessarily get easier, but something about it may tell you, or may not. You may go another direction and go back into some other kind of meditation or yoga or who knows what. Something that may feel better to you or more authentic. Not here to just to disagree with you or have a debate. But the thing about shikantaza is it actually begins to look at the enemy. It actually looks at that it's number one. It actually looks at, what's that other part of it? Enemy, numero, no. It looks at that. And when it looks at that, it doesn't see much. It just sees some kind of darkness or some kind of a wall, because in order for anything to show up as something else, it has to have characteristic features and so on, which tend to do what? Take us in circles. So that's why I have said, you've heard other teachers say, besides me, sit down, hold still, watch what moves until you just don't even know what you're doing or what you're looking at or why you're even there. This is very threatening to self-centeredness, to ego, to the enemy number one, because it's like there's too much openness, too many spotlights. I'm being examined by who's examining me? Like you're sitting still and your very false nature, your very enemy number one is starting to get nervous, starting to, little beads of sweat are rising on his brow, because it might not be so good. So you might hear coming out of this mind space, you might hear something saying, this is not working, shouldn't we find something else to do? So this is why it's so necessary to have some kind of a structure to help you. The Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, the three jewels, 2,500 years of this, long time. And it shows up in different ways with different schools. I just spoke with someone today who was a Buddhist, who was a student in Kwanum, I think I'm saying that right, a form of Zen Buddhism that shows up in ancient Korea. Different, but not better, not worse. We need all of these schools. There's so many different dynamics, so many different ways of being confused, but could be covered by enemy number one, mistaken identity. Mistaken identity. Here, there is no one here. It just looks like it. And there's no one out there. It just looks like it. Both of those have to be taken care of from the point of view of awareness. You have to see what it is. You don't have to get rid of it. Getting rid of it, then it just then we have accomplished something. We're suddenly that someone who doesn't believe in duality. We get a credential because we know so much about non-duality. Realization, you say it, has to be seen. If it's seen, if it is seen, then there is no conclusion, because the very nature of relative truth is conclusion. If you see what this is, you've transcended it. Does that mean you've left it behind? No, because then it would be more relativity. Did you seek or said yes? So you agree with me?
Yes.
You do? You agree with me? Your eyes are bugging out. Anybody else agree? You agree? Oh, he doesn't agree. Took three, the third person finally wised up and realized the best thing to say is no. No, Don is right. Are you right, Don?
I don't know.
Good answer. That's a great answer. Don't worry, I'm not going to embarrass anybody else. Just those guys. And I didn't embarrass anybody because they all know that I'm harmless. Questions, please, if you have them. Enemy number one.
Kevin bowing.
Kevin.
What is it about proof that makes the Dharma doze off? Bowing.
Yeah, what makes it doze off because the proof is relative. It's a relative situation, and relative proof is when these two things come together, there's going to be a sound. Want me to prove it? What are you going to do with it? You can't collect that unless you write books about it or talk about it or explain it. So, but this is the sound. This is what Zen Buddhist teaching in the past, one of the famous koans, is the sound of one hand clapping. And the reason that is spoken that way is because the sound of one hand clapping is a sound. But whereas this sound is here it is. Okay, it's gone. The sound of one hand clapping can never go away because it's never been produced. So therefore, it is eternal. As has been said in the past, the nature, sound itself is not eternal, but the nature of sound is eternal from the relative point of view, since we're all hanging out here and talking. More, Kevin? Since you
bowing, is there any way to avoid the first misunderstanding?
Senchu's asking if there's any way to avoid the first misunderstanding, which is mistaken identity, that we are somebody. I don't know if there's a way to avoid it. I'm not saying there isn't, but it doesn't look like it. The only way we can work with that is to meet the Buddha's Dharma, meet the truth. It might not be Buddhism, it might be something else, but it has to deal with that whole factor of identity. Somebody doing something relative, if somebody is connected to a body-mind complex that is producing all kinds of things that are saying, yeah, you're here, you can feel, you can touch, smell, taste, hear, think, you can evaluate, you can judge, you can make money, you can lose money, you can rob or you can get robbed, you can live further or you can, just all the polarities are constantly yammering at you. You're somebody, you're real. We even do it in a way that is extremely, that seems extremely helpful, but is actually ultimately is damaging and not helpful. And that's like trying to help somebody get self-esteem. You know, you're really a valuable person. Not that we couldn't say that in some ways, but quite often that is more about the person who is saying it wanting to be a person who's helpful, which is another sneaky backdoor of the deception we call ego. Trying to look like a helpful person rather than be fundamentally helpful in most cases is mind your own business and respect people's confusion rather than go in and go to war with them over it. And of course, what I say about that is train your mind. I'm not saying train your mind like you're on a ski slope necessarily, training your body to do something. I'm saying look and see the way in which your mind is entrained by hope and fear and belief and and wanting something else. Second noble truth of the Buddha. First one is suffering. The second one is wanting something else. Not wanting this, wanting something other, desire. And it just takes us in circles. This does not mean, in case you're jumping the so-called gun, this does not mean you have to get rid of desire or aggression. That's a trap, and that's another sneaky way that ego, enemy number one, keeps you entrained into thinking that you have to do something about the bad things and push up the good things and get rid of the bad things and all that. Control. You don't. You can do the whole thing with awareness. Be aware. Train yourself to be aware of whatever is moving this way and that way. It may look good, may look bad, may look neutral. But do nothing with it other than just receive, just observe that movement. And eventually, over time, there's no guarantee, but eventually over time, that identity that is trying to hide out so it is not seen through as something that's unreal, a chimera, eventually that it can't hide out unless it has to have some passion. And I don't mean the emotion, the passion of listening to Mozart. I don't mean that kind of passion, which is a liberated kind of emotion. There's no jealousy there. I'm not saying that somebody wasn't jealous of Amadeus, but I'm not saying there's in the production of that, no jealousy. In the paintings of Van Gogh, no intense passion without grasping. I'm not saying his personality wasn't disturbed and he eventually had to end his life because of intense suffering, but that which he produced was unhindered. How that ever happened was so much insanity and fear going on. That's why it is so amazing. I could say more, but I'd rather hear from one of you if you haven't.
Don Bowing. From the example of you picking on the three of us, how should we receive your teaching?
Oh, you did it. You didn't fight back. You didn't get upset. Well, at least you're not showing me that. You did it. You received it. All of you did, as far as I'm concerned. But every time you receive, if you come to some kind of a conjunction there where you think you've received, then you probably have work to do, because there's nothing to receive. You aren't fundamentally receptive. Is receptive a word? It is now. The next talk will be on receptive. No, I wouldn't do that to you guys. Did I answer your question, or did it make things worse?
Neither or both.
You get smart with me. Neither of both. You guys hear that? Non-dual talking. Further questions out there in Zoom land?
Isaac Bowing.
Yes, Isaac.
Sorry, I saw another question in the chat. I can
Whatever you want. You're drivers.
Let me read that one first. It's from Maria. Who can hear the sound of one hand clapping?
Nobody can, because if somebody hears it, it's not one hand clapping, and it's wrong. It's wrong. No one hears it. That's why it is such a powerful teaching. Sound of one hand. So we're going to sound, and we're going to one hand, and then and then sometimes people get a little silly with it, and they try to one up the Zen master and slap themselves on the head or something like that. And that's kind of that cheapens the whole thing. We don't need that. You don't need the one hand to hit something. It's not about literally doing it. It's the sound of one hand clapping. I hear it. You hear it? You hear it? No, you don't. I don't hear it. Do I hear it? Yeah, I hear it. Okay, Maria. That's all the questions you get to ask.
Isaac bowing.
Kidding you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So, when a question arises, I try to investigate it. That's my first impulse. But when that happens, it seems I'm instantly overwhelmed with an answer, and I don't know if that answer is should I ask, is it better to ask the questions right away without investigation, I guess, for me personally? Or should I try to really summarize it and get to the bottom as much as I can?
You got any more ors?
No.
No. You shouldn't. That help?
Let me rephrase because it doesn't.
Go ahead. Mind if I lean back?
Sure. Mind if I do?
Yeah.
No.
Well,
Should I ask the question right away when it arises? Bowing.
I would say it's, I don't think there's any situation that I can say, always do this. I would say, leave it up to you. I mean, if it's a question that you can answer yourself, you might want to see what the teaching person has to say. You just recently asked me to function as your teacher. Well, I have a teacher. You're not going to give the teacher the benefit of the doubt. So you should always come forward with a question. Just keep it as simple as possible. Leave all the oars at home in your boat. Just a straight question. If you think you have the answer to the question, then you could ask the question in such a way that the only way I can respond to you is directly, which is my favorite pastime. Direct. Either or is, that's your issue. If you give me a bunch of ors, then I'm thinking, what are we going to do with that? I might have to just say what I just said a minute ago, which was what? No. Then you'll notice that fits. Why does it fit? Because you don't know what you've asked me. You have to know what you're asking. It's a very, this is the deception of ego, that it's so incredibly intelligent. The mind stream is it's not a compliment to you. I'm just saying our minds are incredibly gifted or intelligent. Just as human beings have built, we've gone to the moon and all that, can go on and on and on. Or we produced 2,500 years ago, we produced a spiritual genius of the first order, which is the Buddha, and lots of other ones since then. And that's powerful intelligence that looks at the complicated miasma of the world and relative truth and is able to see just this. There's no self, there's no separate self anywhere. Everything is dependent on everything. Of course, he had the support of Indian philosophy, which goes back even further than that into the various ancient teachings of India. But so you could just, when a question comes up, if you don't want a teacher, that's up to you. But if you have a teacher, then ask the teacher, make it as direct as possible. Just ask what it is, and then you get a response, and then you might have another question there. So keep it as call and response. I sometimes say I don't have conversations. I can have all kinds of conversations with people. I'm just kind of hanging out in the coffee shop. We get a coffee shop? We don't have one, but if we ever get a coffee shop, I'll meet you there. We'll sit down and we'll have coffee, if that's on my diet at the time, which it may not be. And then we'll have go back and forth about a conversation. But when I'm sitting here functioning as a Dharma teacher, then you just give me a straight question, no matter what it is, and I'll do my very best. I'm as sincere as I can be to help you see, in this situation, see the nature of the enemy number one. Further question, Eric? Isaac?
Thank you. That wraps up that one. Another quick one. I just finished cutting through spiritual materialism. Should, for my next book to start, wait, I have my options for you. I'm gonna give you orders for this one. But
Don't give me any orders. I got an option for you. I got it already. You ready?
read again.
Yeah.
All right. That's what I was thinking.
You might be a student of mine after all. Yeah, read it again. And,
I was actually thinking that.
yeah, read it again and slow down and read it, especially the introduction. Introduction on that talks about the three lords of materialism, and the next chapter, which is called spiritual materialism. Read those so you're really clear about those. We've been studying that book. I've been studying that with a community, a small 2 or 3 people, or as many as a couple dozen, for the last, I don't know, 48 years, 47 years, every week, and sometimes a couple times a week. That book by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche is endless. It has an endless depth to it of all the texts he wrote. I'm not saying there weren't maybe better texts. I haven't read everything. But that's a powerful, accessible text for the beginning person and for somebody who's been studying for 20 or 30 years. Extremely powerful information on the nature of ego, the nature of the mind, the nature of confusion, the nature of the three realms, the 6 realms, and so on. So yeah, read that again. As you know, I think you can also study that. I think, what is it, Tuesday nights? Tuesday nights here, you're on Eastern time, so Tuesday nights, tune in. We go through that book, and we get done with it, go right back through it again. We've been doing that, and it's much to the dismay of those who are studying it.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Yes, Christopher.
Christopher bowing. So, if the ego is enemy number 1, then is there like a non-ego or like a non-self, and if there is, then how is it distinct or in relation to the ego?
Yeah, it's wisdom would be the opposite if you wanted to use a polarity. Wisdom. So
that's what you call it.
Yeah, wisdom. It's an open dimension that doesn't see anything else but wisdom. It really doesn't even see wisdom, but we need to talk about it relatively, otherwise you can't teach it. It doesn't see something else. It doesn't see space and time. It doesn't see anything else. Yet it also doesn't ignore anything. So therefore, if relative truth shows up, it's totally happy with that. It's happy with everything. You can't find that kind of happiness in relative truth. Buddhism, what is talked about in Buddhism is bliss, which is not happiness particularly. It's not a feeling. More?
Shoto bowing. What, to use that idea of wisdom and the ego, what's having our dreams at night?
What is having our dreams? What's the presumption that there's a what? You think 15 mice in a row are having our dreams? That's where I went immediately. Which mouse is having the strongest part of the dream? Which mouse is holding up that part of the dream that has the most sharp edges in it? And which mouse is, you see what I'm saying? You could take that anywhere. Give me what it is you want to know rather than what you've boiled down into the bottom of the pan. Go ahead. What do you want to know? What do you want to understand? Give it to me simply. I can't help you there. Maybe somebody else can. Christopher, can you help him? Okay, he's about to help you. Go ahead, Christopher.
What is the thing that creates our dreams? The what?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, why do you have to give it a label?
There's your answer. Thanks, Christopher. Okay, further questions? Yes, Sokuzan.
How do we not fight with an enemy?
So you might have to somewhat. You might have to interact in a way that you would call fighting somewhat, so you can get an idea of what the whole structure is about. Because if we try to cure ourselves, be really good too quick, then that which has not been observed, the cheating part of the dishonest, the deceitful part of the consciousness goes underground and waits for, you could say, waits for a time when it can be triggered and come out of that cave of demons and just blow everything away. So it charges its batteries in the back room. So you might have to, in order to keep that from building up, you might have to be, I sometimes say, just be genuine, like as Trungpa Rinpoche said, or be the emotion for 30 seconds, the very emotion you're trying to get rid of. Be the anger, be the jealousy, be the avarice, be the greed, be the anxiety, instead of trying to medicate or meditate or push on it or do anything to get rid of it, got to get rid of this. I can't stand this feeling anymore. Give it a little bit of room so you can see what it is.
Is coming back to the concept that there isn't anyone adding confusion onto the situation?
Not necessarily. And that's why it's a teaching, it's a conceptual concept. There is no self in the skandhas, form, feeling, perception, concept, consciousness, no one there. No, there's something happening there, but it is not a separate being. It's an aspect of dependent origination that shows up in the mind stream of a living being, of a human being, that tends to start to polarize and look for right and wrong, up and down, back and forth, success and failure, materialism. And there are some people some cultures who, some aspects of indigenous culture is a lot of emphasis on spirit realm, on transcending this world, and on being on kindness, taking care of others. It might not be necessarily some kind of ultimate enlightenment, but it might be just a strong respect for the confusion and the disharmony in people who have difficulty, rather than going to war and fighting with them, and take care of them. Just like if you had 3 children, which you don't, who were unruly, and you wouldn't be mean to them, you would try to help them. But those same 3 children, when they're 30 years old, suddenly they're wrong. Suddenly they're enemies, or not your children necessarily. Tend to go to war with something that threatens us so that we can't control. More?
Is coming back to that concept that there isn't anyone at odds with being the emotion?
Paraphrase your question.
Can we? Does coming back to a concept to get in the way of experiencing what's showing up?
Yeah, it does. But the awareness is there, so you're not trapped by that particular situation, because you've been training your awareness, which is not a muscle particularly, and it's not a gathering of some kind of insight gun. It's just this is why the teaching of the Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nirmanakaya, that things are functioning on several different levels. Absolute truth. As someone who realizes what this is living in absolute truth and in relative truth simultaneously. And it's so powerful that if you meet them and you don't know that they're a Dharma teacher, they'll just seem like any other ordinary person, having a toothache or having a cup of coffee or complaining about politics. But the deep understanding is seeing that there is no issue or problem anywhere. Everything is perfect as it is. This doesn't mean you ignore the relativity. This doesn't mean you let people break into your house because we're all one. No, you go and you take them out if you need to. You deal with it. You don't have some kind of special person who is kind, but they're actually using the kindness to get an identity that they're a kind person, so they can somehow skip rope all the way through a lifetime, and they're still going to end up facing their self-deception.
Going back on something you said in book study yesterday, I don't know what awakening is, but I don't have any doubts about you. What am I perceiving?
I don't know what it looks like to you. You mean I look okay? I don't know, it's kind of confusing, isn't it? What do you want to know? What's the question?
What shows up as clear?
You're looking at yourself. You're not looking at Sokuzan, you're looking at your true nature. You begin to see it in another person. It's called a true teacher, a person who is speaking out of a human being who has realized their true nature. And if this person sets themselves up, or someone sets them up, or circumstances set them up as someone who's teaching the truth, a spiritual path, then in our situation it's called Buddha-dharma. Not that it couldn't happen with some other designation or name or structure. So you recognize it, you meet that person, and there's something there that you connect with, or that helps you to see your self-deception. That was my experience when I met my teacher. It was at once exhilarating and painful, because I was looking at someone who was looking at me. It was not looking at their idea of me, they were looking at me. And that was embarrassing. But I'm particularly screwed up, and you're not. That's why you're probably not having that issue. More? Any further questions? June.
June bowing. What's controlling enemy number one?
Fear of oblivion. You know, you got a little bit of street cred here because you're somebody, you're going somewhere, and these are your feet, these are your hands, this is your motorbike. You know, you're everywhere you look, and everything you do, you're getting relative confirmation. This is my kotsu. I made this. No, I didn't. But I could lie about it. You guys would know. That was my wrist that hurt when I reached up there. It hurt like hell. Ouch. Just the relative stuff that's everywhere just keeps saying separate, 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 separate. And then when we get worried about the separation and paranoia, something is in danger, something is frightened. And the nature of consciousness can break down into any form. Consciousness always, always, always finds its own form. And what is its own? That depends on the relative. It's situational. It could be someone dying, and that consciousness could come out and find your form, and you could be inhabited by what we commonly call a ghost or a spirit. Can that happen? Sure, it can. Does it happen much? Probably not very much, but it happens just enough to create more chaos in the world, because people are so grounded in materialism, they just think that can't happen because there's no proof. It's like if you can't, if somebody can disprove gravity, does that mean everybody's gonna go flying off into space? What's the proof of gravity? Apples fall. Is that right? Yeah, in the fall. Who pushed them? Does somebody have to push in that? Does it just, is there some time right there where the gravity just gets so strong, and the love of the apple for its mama gets so weak that it just falls? The tree, I meant, the mama. Yes, go ahead, please.
Bowing. When we see that our beliefs are fueling the control, what
Yes.
do we do with that?
Just look at the beliefs. Don't get rid of them. But just look at the structure of it. See what like, is that true? You believe something, and you could actually question it and simply, is that true? You don't have to do it day in and day out, but you could continue to return to that particular area. Simply put, it might be different if we were to sit down and talk about it more. Question?
When you're bowing, the response you gave to Kuhn, you said consciousness always finds its own form, and its form depends on, what does its form depend on then?
Dependent origination. The consciousness and all of the things that are coming and going, these are illusory because they're impermanent, but there's still something there, but it's unreal. It has no substance in the sense of, I mean, it doesn't mean that a piece of granite and as I sometimes say, a candle flame, they're both here, but one is extremely dense and the other one is not so dense. So there's different levels of that density, and it goes way further than that rock into more density, sometimes called a black hole. And the candle flame goes the other direction into less and less and less density, which is called the spirit realm, if we're still staying with some kind of relative substance. More.
How does consciousness know what to do when it meets dependent origination?
It's not separate from it. Just look, that's the illusion. It looks like objects in the space. It looks like clouds in the sky that they arise in are two separate things. The space of the mind and the thoughts that arise in the mind are not separate. That's why you don't have to do anything with them. You don't have to get rid of thoughts. Some meditation practices are about stopping the mind or not thinking. Even in the Sadhana Mahamudra, Trungpa Rinpoche and his download from the universe, called the Sadhana Mahamudra, download from the Kagyu lineage, talks about, I can't remember I'm not bringing up the phrase. Can any of you remember that? About the
good, bad, happy, and sad, all thoughts vanish into emptiness like an incredible bird in the sky.
No, that's good though. You remember that. Good. You need to say that every day. Keep saying that. Good and bad, happy and sad, all thoughts vanish into emptiness like the imprint of a bird in the sky. Can you believe that? It's not going to come back. Did I answer your question? Don't remember?
It just all feels mysterious.
Well, the feeling, when you was talking about it all feeling mysterious, the feeling of mysterious is not so bad. I mean, that could be more, that's because that's more of an open dimension. That's a kind of thing that the ego mind, the conceptual mind, the hope and fear mind, the personal, the persona, the personhood mind looks at the nebulousness or the cloudiness of the whole thing. It just feels mysterious from a point of view. From a point of view, if it looks mysterious, that you're probably looking at it. But then there's a concept, or there's a coming to a conclusion about it that is mysterious, which actually stops you from seeing what it is. It actually is, you settle for a judgment about it. It's mysterious. It's just mysterious. What do you guys think? Mysterious? No, it's just what it is. There isn't any label for it. Mysterious, cloudiness, might describe it somewhat. Is there a question in the chat box that someone could read? Or not?
Jason Bowing. If you notice that your desire to ask questions appears to feed your ego, would it maybe be better to not ask you questions as soon as they arise? Bowing.
I don't know if I'd put that kind of a gate on it necessarily. You could experiment with it a little bit. If you ask questions and I get real rude with you, and that might tell you one thing. You ask another question and I might compliment you on what a wonderful question you ask, and wish everybody would ask questions like that, but everybody can't be like you, Jason. So I'm just saying it just is so dependent on so many different things. I would say if you're here and you consider, at least for the time being, maybe you're not committed to me as a student, or have a relationship to me as your personal teacher. But if you're here, I get to be the teacher for a little while, for another 20 minutes or whatever it may be. Why wouldn't you ask questions? Ask whatever question you got. Let me have it. I'll be as respectful as I can and try to help you as much as I can without getting in the way of the karma that you probably need to experience in order to realize your true nature. Any further questions?
Isaac bowing.
Go ahead, please.
How can I put myself in a situation to surrender? Bowing.
Yeah, just keep practicing. Just notice the way you're hanging on. Just to be aware of the hanging on. Be aware of the hanging on, because at some point you might be aware of that you're letting go. But if you're aware that you're letting go, even that is hanging on, because you come to a conclusion that you're letting go. But the letting go will be invisible. The letting go will be absolute devastation to the ego. When I say devastation, I'm just saying it can take a while. You might have to take that in small chunks. For each person, it works so many different ways. Some people don't experience that kind of a devastation. It's a different path for them. But when you ask that kind of a question, I would say, just continue. All you have to do is continue. I just met you a short time ago. You've been practicing a short time. You're a young person. That doesn't give you a handicap particularly, but I would say just keep going. This takes a while. Keep going. I'll help you. As long as I'm here, I'll help you. When I'm not here, my students will help you.
Thank you.
They promised me they would. So, and I'm going to hold them responsible. I'll be looking at them from the Dharmakaya with binoculars. That's the one time I'm okay with duality. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that goofy guy can't possibly be awake. You'd be right. You can't be. Any final questions? Got a little bit of time, possibly another 5 minutes. There's one. If not, we can also close. Shoto.
Bowing. Earlier when you were talking about either meeting the teacher or the Buddha, someone not at war with anything, could someone still be at war with that person?
Say more. I'm not tracking what you're saying.
Could the one who has no enemies, could people impute an enemy that direction?
Yes. That's why it's so difficult, because you can't, it's not relative truth. You're not going to get any proof out of this. You have to see this. If you see it, that's the only way you can save all beings. Up until that time, you vow to do it. You can keep returning to relative bodhicitta so that you can eventually see absolute bodhicitta, absolute mind of awakening. So it takes some time, and everyone's working this in a different way. The karma that brought you into this life, that brought me into this life, that sent you, or Ondo, or Don, or anyone else, is so different. So we come to this path and we just do the best we can with it. But there's not going to be, this is sometimes what, we'll say it this way, there's not going to be a conclusion. Awakening is not a conclusion, because it's not separate from anything. So it can't go from delusion to awakening. That's why delusion is awakening. You have to see it. I can say the difficult one in the West would be for one to grasp, or should I say grok, that good and evil are not separate from each other. You can't have evil without good. You can't have good without evil, because they feed off from each other for their manifestation as that polarity. This doesn't mean that so-called evil is somehow gets a ticket to ride just because I'm part of this, so I get to jump on the train with my skull and crossbones and my samurai sword.
Jason bowing.
Yes, Jason.
By labeling ego as an enemy, are we thus feeding the ego because of the nature, the duality nature of that statement? Bowing.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, it fundamentally doesn't work. It's just something to name a Dharma talk. But I reminded you, I did not name this. Sokuzan did it. I didn't do this.
Did I just unravel the entire talk?
No, you don't have that much power. Go ahead, Sokuzan, speak up and defend yourself.
Sokuzan bowing. It came up in book study yesterday, and you said, before going to war out there, make friends with the enemy inside.
Yes.
How do we make friends with the enemy inside?
Just continue to look at it and look at the negativity, and look at the positivity, look at the structure of what you want, what you don't want, and just look at the self-deception until it clarifies itself. And the way it clarifies itself is not to go away. It's just part of dependent origination. You finally have what is commonly called humility, but it's not going to show up as somebody who everybody thinks is humble. That won't, because someone who actually has or is full of that dynamic is like a blank screen for everyone. There's nothing happening there. So therefore, everybody can project, and someone who sees who's there might project. They might see humility there. They might see love. If they're really having a lot of difficulty, they might see a threat because I get too close to this person, and my self-centeredness, my ego, my credentials, my wonderful ability to analyze and is threatened, because here's a person who sees clearly what's in front of them, whomever is in front of them, sees the truth. This is what I experienced with my root guru, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche.
Sokuzan bowing.
Yes.
Tim has a question in the chat box, and he asks, is my ego responsible for karma? Bowing.
So, somewhat, but ego is just a temporary device to give you some kind of positionality in terms of whatever is happening to you. It kind of develops. Each lifetime it comes up in different ways. To watch a small child slowly, because of causes and conditions that brought them here, those things are still trailing around, still looking for some kind of way to control, ward off fear, get some kind of basic safety going on. So you could say that there's a responsibility, but it's not something we have to go to war with or solve or get rid of. You don't have to get rid of something that's unreal. The whole damn thing is unreal. The whole calliope just makes a lot of racket. Something that has been mentioned before. A lot of bluster, and it's just everywhere. Just a lot of energy going this way. Sometimes that energy shows up in the form of nuclear warfare, just a manifestation of the stuff that's happening in the mind. We're so worried, we think we actually need to blow up the world to save us. Not really smart. Aliens are watching us, and they're having a hard time with us because we're their experiment. You guys knew that, right? The aliens, yeah. Well.
Sokuzan bowing. Yeah. Nettie has a question.
Nettie, go ahead.
She says, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. Is there an example, please?
Yeah, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. May I free all beings. That's the complete, or that tail end of it. So defeat the enemy wrongdoing. We're deliberately looking at the ego structure and calling a diamond a diamond, a heart a heart, a spade a spade. We're calling it what it is, relatively. Defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, those are the last of the 12 links in the chain of existence, which you may recognize. May I free all beings. The vow of the Bodhisattva to put others before themselves. Quite a big vow. Don't do it unless you have to. There's no credential there. You won't even know if you're functioning as a Bodhisattva, you won't even know it because you'll meet everybody as they are and you'll just be that person. They may know that that's what's happening. They may not. They may think they're looking at themselves. They may think they're looking at somebody else. They may think they're looking at an enemy, a lover, a guru, a friend, any number of things should show up that way. I'm sure you've noticed.
Junshu bowing. There are 2 questions from Jethro in the UK.
Jethro.
The first question is, as a newcomer to Shikantaza, how often should I sit?
Just a general situation, it would be depending on your, whatever, your situation, your job, your family. You know, if you can sit for an hour a day, 40 minutes to an hour a day, every day, strike the bell, sit, hold still, look at the wall or a refrigerator or whatever, something where nothing is happening, and don't add, subtract, divide if you can help it. If you add, subtract, and divide, then just watch that happen. And then try to, a general idea there is to try to do block sitting if you can, once a week. You can join the monastery, has a block sit is on, we have everything we do these days is on Zoom, I think, isn't it? Pretty much. You can, this monastery is there's something happening just about every day. And Thursday is just block sit day. There's no sutras being chanted from 7 in the morning till 11 is block sit. 1 o'clock till 5 in the afternoon is block sitting. And you can come on and see people sitting, I don't know how many, maybe 3, 2 or 3, whatever. People that don't have jobs or can do that, come and sit down, hold still. We don't do guided, don't do walking meditation together because I think that's up to you when you get up and walk, not up to somebody with a bell in their striker in their hand or some kind of a schedule. Doesn't work. And how did I come to that idea? From doing it the other way for 3.5 decades. That's how I decided that's not important. Not important. Walking meditation should be up to you, not up to somebody looking at a schedule. That being said, everything is up to you, but so if you ask me, I would say sit for an hour a day. That's pretty good, more or less, or sit less if you need to, or more if you can, and then try to do some block sitting. And there I have a whole video called block sitting, which explains in detail how that works and what that is about. It isn't just as simple as it sounds. I think it's on YouTube, isn't it? Yeah. A bunch of people here are shaking their heads, and they're all people I know. Right? No?
Junshu bowing. His second question is it necessary to drop all other practices from other traditions?
You know, that would be up to you. Just as off the top of my head, I would say, yeah, I probably should simplify it a little bit. Just like it's hard to be on 3 different diets at the same time. And this is an ego diet. But to have a lot, especially if you're going back and forth of which one, I know I get caught in that all the time with any diet I'm on. And I have all this input from all these brainy people. And but I still listen to them. I consider what people say about anything that has to do with something, an area that I'm not sure of what all is happening. As you know, this is a pretty complicated situation as far as health goes. Hard to say what's happening, and it's hard to figure out when somebody's trying to help you and when they're trying to use you, make money from you, control you. This is true in the meditation situation or Buddhism. It happens, it's in everything. So I would say probably less is better, but you could say, well, we've got all these scrolls and all these fancy mantras and everything, but those have been looked at very closely. There isn't anything happening here that doesn't need to be here based on what? On what this old man sees, not on something written down in a book somewhere. So I would say, not knowing anything about you at all, including your age or anything, but I would say you could set, if you're interested in Shikantaza, if you're interested in what I'm teaching, you could look at, I think my book, Meditation Primers on, maybe you've seen that, maybe not. That's basic Shikantaza instruction, and that's on Kindle, and you can buy the book from the monastery or on Amazon or wherever, but you could read those and just do there's 17 of them in there. Just do 17 days and just do that, and don't do anything else for a while. Stay away. You can drink coffee. Wait a minute, that's a diet. Let's see. Yeah, I would say eliminate. If you have a sutra you're chanting or something like that, I wouldn't necessarily get rid of that. And if you actually have a teacher, it doesn't have to be me, then you might ask permission from that teacher. So say you want to practice this for a while. If you don't have a teacher, and you want to relate to this person for a teacher, then do Shikantaza for 17 days. And at the end of that, come back and we'll talk some more about it. If you like. There's no requirement. Final thing before we close is the reason to do this. The ultimate reason is to save all beings, to support our Sangha, our world, human beings, all living beings, all sentient beings, all insentient beings, all save everything. And how do we do that? We realize we're not separate from it. It's a powerful realization. It's not a conclusion. It's a realization. Big difference. So we have to go at it slow. We have to start where we're at and proceed along, train our minds. If you can, I'm very biased, you're probably going to need the structure of the Buddha or the teacher, the Dharma or the teaching, and the Sangha or the community. Right now we've got all three. I make no claims other than saying Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, teacher, teaching, community. Very important. Those three are all indispensable in my experience over the last, whatever it's been, a long time. We close. Did you have another question, Kozan?
Well, Timothy Shepard asks, how do you find peace of mind when life gives you chaos? I'm interested in joining. Please say your book again.
The book is a meditation primer, Primer, and it's available from the monastery. It's available on Kindle and on Amazon, and you can. That's a very simple approach to it, and you're welcome to join any of the dozen book studies that are come out of the monastery. Yeah, and there's Junchu's just posted the website, so you can go there and you can get a lot more information from that. Okay, I just saw one of the monks do this, so that must mean it's time to do this.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiro san chi shifu, chi son bu sa mo go sa, mo go ja ho. directions, the three worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokokoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.